If it's done right, it's the toughest job in state government. If it's run right, the office of Attorney General is the toughest job in state government. There are several reasons for that, but one of them is the state's Attorney General is the chief law enforcement official of this state. And you all, it is time for the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi to act as though he is the chief law enforcement official of the state. Many of you know our family's personal story. We lost our youngest son, Brad, at age 21 to suicide after a year of illicit drug use. And some have tried to trivialize my candidacy, friends, by saying that Andy's just a grieving daddy trying to make a point. Well, those folks don't know me very well. Karen and I have certainly done our share of grieving. And we are misty-eyed on plenty evenings because we miss our boy every day. But make no mistake, my friends, we are steely-eyed about the conviction that until the Attorney General of the state of Mississippi gets serious about the fight against the scourge of drugs in our communities, we are never going to turn the corner in the war on drugs. The drug predators in our midst do not care at all about the quality of life. In fact, they don't care at all about the value of life. And you can bet they care who our Attorney General is. You can bet that the human traffickers who are selling boys and girls into the sex trade and adults into indentured servitude, you can bet that they care who our Attorney General is. You can bet that public servants who are feeding themselves illegally off the public trough care who the Attorney General is. And I can promise you, if Andy Taggart is your Attorney General, I will not be sitting on my hands waiting for a phone call from the U.S. Attorney to invite me to a press conference because he's taking care of our dirty business for us. But it's the toughest job in state government, not just because the Attorney General is our chief law enforcement official, but also because he is our top lawyer. And I have the harebrained notion that the state's top lawyer ought to be a practicing lawyer, not just somebody that has a law degree hanging on the wall. Somebody who has been in the courtroom advocating for his client's positions, trying to persuade judges and juries about why his position is the right one. In fact, silly me, I think the Attorney General ought actually to show up in court on your behalf from time to time. As some of you all are aware, when the legislature passed the fetal heartbeat bill, that is to say you cannot commit an abortion once a human heartbeat can be detected. When our legislature passed that bill and the governor signed it into law, of course it was immediately challenged. They took it into federal district court. Your Attorney General was nowhere to be seen. The constitutionality of that statute was struck down, and then all of a sudden our Attorney General shows up and said, well, don't worry, I'm going to appeal it. Well, I'm going to tell you, folks, I do worry. Because if our Attorney General did not have enough zeal to show up in court and argue on your behalf for the constitutionality of a statute to protect the lives of unborn babies, I wonder how zealous he's going to be when he appeals that same decision. But in addition to that, folks, consider what the state's top lawyer ought to be about. In the last 2 years, I've had the privilege of arguing before the Mississippi Supreme Court, before the Mississippi Court of Appeals, and before the Federal District Court in Jackson. That distinguishes me from the other candidates in this race. But consider whether you also might take the recommendation of some other clients who have previously hired me as their lawyer on your behalf. When I was chief of staff to Kirk Fordyce, he hired me as your lawyer when Mike Moore wouldn't take the position that Governor Fordyce wanted taken. When Haley Barbour was governor, he hired me as your lawyer to argue in favor of voter ID because Jim Hood was not in favor of voter ID. When Phil Bryant was state auditor, he hired me as your lawyer because Jim Hood would not take the position that we ought to try to recover the illegal attorney's fees that arose out of the WorldCom tax case. And so I handled that case as well. And then a few years ago, as you'll remember, when our Department of Corrections was racked with a scandal that led to our corrections commissioner stealing $1 million that we know about, Governor Phil Bryant asked me to head up the task force to make the recommendations to him and to the legislature about how to try to keep that kind of bribery scandal from ever happening again. So if you have to make a decision about who you want to put in the toughest office in state government, you'll be doing it at the same time that you decide who's going to be our next governor. Now, you may, like me, think that our next governor is going to be a Republican, either Tate Reeves or Bill Waller or Robert Foster. And if you think our next governor is going to be a Republican, don't you also want somebody who is willing to exercise independent judgment and offer mature advice rather than somebody who's just going to toe the party line? But maybe you think a Democrat's going to be our next governor. If you think our next governor is going to be Felicia P. Williams or Robert Schuler Smith or Jim Hood, then don't you think our Attorney General ought to be somebody who can be courageous and be an honest broker of the truth and not just a yes person to somebody on the opposite philosophical side of the spectrum? But let me tell you, it does not matter. It does not matter who you think the next governor is going to be, or whether you think the next governor is going to be a Republican or a Democrat. Because what you need to be assured of is whoever the next governor is, that the Attorney General views his office as a place of public service and not a political stepping stone to try to get to the next highest political office. We're about to make a decision about hiring the first Republican Attorney General since the 19th century. In the 19th century, a missionary named C.T. Studd wrote this little poem. Some want to live their lives within the sound of church or chapel bell, but I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell. That's where the fighting's being done. That's where the fire is the hottest. That's where the enemy is at his strongest. You're about to make a decision about who you want to hire for the state's toughest job. And I'm asking you to put Andy Taggart on post a yard from hell where the fire is the hottest and the enemy is the strongest, because I'm determined that he is not going to drag another baby with him. Please keep me in mind, Andy Taggart for Attorney General. Thank you.